There is a very specific, kind of highly universal moment of property owner panic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, picture standing in your front yard. Maybe you live out in El Monte, California.
Right, right.
And you're staring up at this massive, I don't know, an aging eucalyptus or giant oak tree. And it's magnificent, but
But it's huge.
yeah, the canopy is just wildly overgrown. It's dropping heavy debris everywhere. And you finally decide, okay, this needs professional management.
Right. It's time.
Yeah, it's time. So you call around for estimates, and the numbers the arborists hand you are just staggering.
And they can be a real shock.
Yeah, it feels like an extortionate amount of money to deal with, wood and leaves.
Hmm.
But then, almost miraculously, a flyer appears taped to your door. Or maybe you spot a handwritten sign on a telephone pole at the end of the street that says, tree cutting services 50% off.
Yeah, the classic cheat flyer.
Right. And it just seems like this hyper-local market inefficiency that you can exploit to solve an incredibly expensive problem.
It's highly alluring. I mean, the immediate psychological response is to assume that the professionals were just price gouging you, right?
Exactly.
And that this independent operator is just offering, the fair market value for manual labor. But based on the arboriculture analyses from John Constantine at El Monte Tree Service, that little piece of paper fluttering on your door is actually a legally binding trap.
Wow.
You aren't just buying cheap labor, you are inadvertently assuming a massive transfer of risk.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking Constantine's articles to understand the hidden mechanisms, both legal and biological, that turn budget tree care into this catastrophic liability.
Right.
But before we get into the granular details of property law, I really want to push back on the premise a little bit.
Sure.
Because when I look at a tree, I see a static, physical object. We aren't building a Swiss watch here, right? We are dismantling a structure.
I hear that a lot, yeah.
If someone has a heavy-duty chainsaw, a really tall ladder, and, an understanding of basic gravity, isn't that basically all it takes? It feels like paying for a professional chef to make toast.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the flaw in that logic is viewing the tree as a static object.
It's not.
It's not. No. A mature tree is actually a really complex system of dynamic tension. You are dealing with thousands of pounds of green wood suspended 50, maybe 80 feet in the air.
Okay.
The branches aren't just resting there. They are under immense physical stress.
So they're like loaded springs.
Exactly. When you introduce a chainsaw to a load-bearing branch, you are suddenly altering the tree's entire center of gravity and releasing that stored kinetic energy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a trained arborist understands the physics of how that wood will compress or how it might twist or even kick back when the tension is cut.
Right, right.
An untrained operator with a ladder, they just hope gravity takes it straight down.
And I'm guessing gravity does not always take it straight down.
Not at all.
And so when it doesn't, we hit the first major trap outlined in the sources, which is the legal reality of what happens when that untrained operator gets hurt.
Yeah.
And it is completely counterintuitive to me that paying some independent guy a flat fee in cash to cut a branch somehow makes me his employer in the eyes of liability law. I mean, how does that legal mechanism actually work?
It comes down to a legal concept called the statutory employer.
Yeah.
And also premises liability.
Okay.
So if you hire a fully insured professional tree service, that corporate entity assumes the medical and legal liability for their employees, right?
Under their own insurance.
Exactly, under their workers' compensation policy. However, if you hire an unlicensed individual or a crew that just doesn't carry active workers' comp, the state looks at the situation and determines that since no formal company is employing this laborer, the property owner who hired them,
Wait.
you default to the role of general contractor.
Oh my gosh. So by handing over like $200 in cash, I am unwittingly drafting an employment contract where I assume all the occupational risk.
Pretty much.
But wait, doesn't standard homeowners insurance cover accidents on my property? Like, if a guest falls down my stairs, my policy usually covers that.
There is a massive distinction in insurance underwriting between a guest suffering an accident and an unlicensed laborer suffering an occupational injury.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Many standard homeowner policies have very specific exclusions for injuries sustained by unlicensed contractors who are performing high-risk work.
Oh, because tree work is obviously high risk.
Extremely. The policy operates on the expectation that you are hiring insured professionals. So if that uninsured tree cutter misjudges the tension on a branch like we talked about, gets kicked off his ladder, and sustains, a permanent spinal injury,
Oh, wow.
your insurance company can completely deny the claim.
Because they'll say you hired an unlicensed contractor.
Right. And now you are personally liable for his emergency medical bills, his long-term rehabilitation, and his lost wages.
Which means the discount that you got on the tree trimming could easily result in a multi-$100,000 lawsuit that just bankrupts your family.
Easily.
And Constantine's articles point out that this liability extends way beyond personal injury to actual property damage. Because these budget crews, they also lack general liability insurance.
Right. They don't have that either.
So if they miscalculate a rigging point and drop a 2-ton log onto your roof, or it crushes your freshly poured concrete driveway, there's no corporate policy to file a claim against. You just absorb the entire cost of that structural repair.
And we have to examine this through the lens of investment properties, too. Because for landlords and property managers, the stakes scale exponentially.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, the law imposes a strict duty of care on property owners to maintain safe environments for their tenants.
Right. It's negligence, per se, I think it's called. Like if a landlord uses the cheapest, unlicensed crew to handle the landscaping at a duplex, and a poorly cut branch later falls and injures a tenant, the landlord hasn't just suffered property damage, they have actively breach their legal duty of care by utilizing incompetent labor.
Exactly. It provides the tenant's legal counsel with just a perfectly paved road to a severe negligent settlement.
Wow.
I mean, trying to optimize cash flow on an investment property by using an unvetted tree service, it's essentially gambling the equity of your entire real estate portfolio just to save a few $100s.
Okay, so the legal framework is just an absolute minefield, but let's assume the absolute best-case scenario for the budget flyer. Okay? The guy climbs the tree, he doesn't fall, he doesn't drop a log on the roof, and he leaves the yard relatively clean. According to the arboriculture science in these sources, even this successful transaction is a biological disaster.
Oh, it really is.
They use this term tree topping. And reading the mechanics of what topping actually does, it sounds less like pruning and more like amputating a limb without suturing the wound.
That is a highly accurate analogy. If we connect this to the bigger picture, topping is the indiscriminate severing of the main leader branches. You're effectively chopping the top half of the tree off to artificially reduce its height.
Which is what people want when it gets too tall.
Right. But untrained operators do this because it's fast and it requires literally zero understanding of plant biology.
Yeah.
But by removing the entire apical meristem.
Wait, the apical what?
Apical meristem. It's the top of the canopy where the primary growth and foliage exist. By removing that, they're instantly starving the tree's root system of its ability to photosynthesize.
Okay, so the tree is suddenly deprived of its food source entirely, and it has these massive exposed surface wounds facing the sky.
Right.
How does the biological system even react to that level of acute trauma?
Well, it goes into a desperate survival mode. The tree forces out a rapid flush of what we call epicormic shoots. These are entirely new branches that sprout from dormant buds just below the amputation cuts.
But the sources note that these new shoots are incredibly weak. Why is that? If the tree is putting all of its emergency energy into growing them, shouldn't they be really strong?
You would think so, but it's a structural flaw. Normal branches, they develop really slowly over years, and their fibers are deeply integrated into the structural heartwood of the main trunk.
Like bolted in?
Exactly. But epicormic shoots, that's emergency growth. They were only anchored to the outermost layer of the wood, just beneath the bark.
Oh, so they're just sort of tacked onto the surface?
Exactly. So within a couple of years, you have these rapidly growing, really heavy 20-foot branches that are essentially just surface attached to what is now a rotting stump.
Wow.
Yeah, they become massive levers that are highly prone to just snapping off in a moderate windstorm.
And meanwhile, those massive unsutured cuts from the original topping that you did, they're collecting rainwater, right? They become direct entry points for airborne fungal spores and boring insects to totally bypass the tree's natural bark defenses. So you have a tree that is rotting from the inside out while simultaneously pushing out these top-heavy, structurally compromised branches.
It is a slow-motion death sentence.
That's terrifying.
The homeowner believes that they've solved their overgrown canopy problem, right?
Right.
But they have actually engineered a hazardous structure that will eventually require a total extraction due to advanced decay. And this is exactly why the International Society of Arboriculture, or the ISA, they strongly condemn topping.
Okay.
The professional alternative is what's called structural pruning.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of structural pruning because it directly addresses the fear that people have of their trees blowing over in a storm. It's not about making the tree shorter, right? It's about altering its aerodynamic drag coefficient.
Precisely the right way to frame it. An overgrown, really dense canopy acts like a massive sail. When a gale force wind hits it, all that kinetic energy is transferred directly down the trunk to the root system. If the load exceeds the root plate's holding capacity, the tree uproots. Structural pruning, on the other hand, selectively thins the canopy. An arborist strategically removes specific branches to allow the wind to pass through the structure, rather than pushing against it.
So it's the mathematical reduction of force. By reducing the canopy density by, 20 or 30%, you are exponentially decreasing the pound of force applied to the basal trunk during a storm, all while keeping those apical branches intact so the tree continues to photosynthesize naturally.
Yeah, exactly. And keeping the structural integrity of the tree intact preserves its financial value, too.
Right, because trees are assets.
We often overlook them as hard assets, yeah.
Yeah.
But a mature, meticulously maintained oak or maple significantly boosts a property's market valuation. I mean, it provides cooling shade that lowers your HVAC costs, and it really enhances curb appeal.
Oh, for sure.
Conversely, a topped, butchered tree signals deferred maintenance to a buyer.
Which makes total sense. I mean, if I'm touring a house on the market and the mature trees look like they were hacked apart with a machete, it instantly reframes how I view the entire property. Like, if the seller cheaped out on the massive living structures looming over the roof, did they also hire unlicensed labor for the electrical panel?
Right.
Did they ignore a slow leak in the plumbing? It completely compromises the perceived integrity of the asset.
Which leads to a really critical point in Constantine's analysis, and that's identifying when a tree has transitioned from an asset into a silent, active liability.
Yes.
Because a butchered tree becomes dangerous over time. But many homeowners are living under trees that are structurally failing right now, and they simply don't know how to read the symptoms.
Let's dive into that diagnostic process. I want to look at the specific warning signs the sources outline because this is so practical. Let's start with a tree leaning. I've noticed trees leaning in my own neighborhood, but I always just assumed it was phototropism, right? Like the tree naturally growing at an angle to seek out sunlight. How do we distinguish between a tree just hunting for light and catastrophic root failure?
So phototropism is a very slow generational growth pattern.
Okay.
The tree develops reaction wood to compensate for the gradual lean, and the surrounding soil remains totally undisturbed. Catastrophic root failure, on the other hand, is sudden. You need to look at the ground on the tension side of the lean.
The tension side.
That's the side the tree is leaning away from.
Ah, okay.
If you see the soil cracking, lifting, or actual roots heaving out of the turf on that side, that indicates the root plate is physically detaching from the earth. The anchor is gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that tree requires emergency extraction before it falls.
That is so specific and helpful. Okay, another symptom mentioned is deep vertical cracks in the main trunk. Now, I assume a vertical crack is much more dangerous than just, surface bark splitting.
Much more. A deep vertical crack indicates shear stress. The actual structural fibers that hold the massive weight of the canopy are splitting apart under the load.
Oh, that's bad.
It's very bad. It compromises the entire weight-bearing column. You also need to inspect the exterior for localized peeling bark.
Explain the mechanism there. Why does bark peel off in patches, and what does it mean for the interior of the tree?
So bark is the armor protecting the vascular cambium.
Okay.
That's the thin layer of tissue just beneath the surface that transports water and nutrients up and down the tree. If large patches of bark are just peeling off and exposing dead, dry wood underneath, it means that section of the vascular system has died. The plumbing is fundamentally broken, and that side of the tree is literally being starved.
And that leads right into the most surprising detail from the text for me, which was fungus. I think the average homeowner sees a mushroom growing near the roots and just assumes it's, damp soil from the sprinklers.
Right.
But the articles highlight fungal fruiting bodies at the base of the trunk as a massive red flag.
It is a critical warning sign because the visible mushroom is just the fruiting body. The actual threat is the mycelial network operating completely out of sight inside the tree.
Inside the wood.
Yes. Certain fungi, like armillaria root rot, are structural pathogens. They survive by chemically digesting the lignin and cellulose.
And that's what makes the wood strong.
Exactly. Those are the very compounds that give wood its strength.
So the fungus is essentially acting as a reverse structural engineer, dissolving the concrete and steel of the tree from the inside out.
That's a great way to put it. By the time you see the mushrooms at the base, the interior heartwood may already be entirely compromised.
Right.
Now, this doesn't mean every fungus equals a death sentence.
Right.
A certified arborist has the diagnostic tools to measure internal wood density. They can determine if the decay is isolated and maybe manageable through soil treatments, or if the structural integrity has crossed the threshold where removal is the only safe option.
And it's not just the tree itself we have to worry about, right?
Yeah.
It's how the tree interacts with the built environment. Constantine brings up overgrown canopies encroaching on roofs. Beyond the obvious physical damage of, heavy branches scraping against the shingles, he points out this really insidious moisture damage.
This raises an important question about microclimates. A dense canopy hanging directly over a roof prevents sunlight from ever drying the structure after a rainstorm.
Oh, yeah.
It creates this microclimate of perpetual dampness that vastly accelerates roof rot and moss growth. But the secondary consequence, which is even worse, is leaf litter overwhelming the gutter system.
Which most people view as merely an annoying chore. Just, I gotta clean the gutters.
Right.
But the text frames clogged gutters as a catalyst for actual foundation failure. Walk me through that chain reaction.
So gutters are designed to explicitly channel water away from the structural perimeter of your home. When they are choked with debris from his unmanaged tree, the water overtops the channels. It pours directly down the siding, rotting the fascia, and then pools really heavily right at the foundation wall.
Okay.
Over seasons of freezing and thawing, or simply through hydrostatic pressure, that pooling water causes the foundation concrete to crack and shift.
So a tree can literally crack your home's foundation without its roots ever coming within 20 feet of the house, purely through water displacement.
Exactly.
That is fascinating. Okay, so we've established the diagnostics. We see the lifted soil. We spot the structural pathogens, or we recognize our roof is rotting. We know we need to hire someone to manage the extraction or the pruning. So what does this all mean? How do we operationalize Constantine's advice? What is the strict vetting playbook to ensure we are hiring a legitimate professional and not just a guy with a nice truck who is going to make us his statutory employer?
The absolute primary rule of the playbook is to discard any verbal quote immediately.
Don't even listen to it.
Nope. A spoken price offers zero legal protection. When a provider arrives on your property, you demand to see their active certificates of liability insurance and workers' compensation. And you do not ask if they have it. You ask them to physically produce the documentation. Or, better yet, have their insurance agent email it directly to you.
Because if the paperwork is expired, you are right back to being the general contractor.
Exactly. Now, once the insurance is verified, we move to the written scope of work.
What needs to be in that?
The estimate must be meticulously detailed. It cannot simply say, trim tree.
Right.
It must specify which branches are being reduced, the exact methods being used, whether they are adhering to ISA pruning standards, and if it's a removal, exactly how the stump and the massive amount of organic debris will be remediated.
And there is a crucial visual tell regarding their equipment, too. The text highlights a significant difference in how professionals physically climb a tree compared to amateurs. Like, if a worker shows up with climbing spikes strapped to their boots to prune your tree, that's a huge red flag, isn't it?
It is a massive red flag. Climbing spikes are essentially sharp steel gaffs that the climber kicks into the trunk to gain purchase. Every single time they take a step, they are violently puncturing the cambium layer, creating hundreds of open wounds that invite the exact fungal pathogens we just discussed.
Just walking up the tree is killing it.
Yeah. Spikes should only ever be used on a tree that is being entirely removed. A true professional pruning, a living tree, uses an intricate rope and harness system, or an aerial bucket truck, to navigate the canopy without inflicting any mechanical damage on the trunk.
It's the difference between surgical precision and just sheer brute force, and that precision extends to how they bring the wood down, too. Amateurs cut a log and let it free fall to the lawn. But earlier, we talked about the kinetic energy stored in that wood. A professional rigging operation doesn't rely on gravity, it actively manages it.
Arboricultural rigging is essentially applied engineering. When a professional removes a 500-pound section of trunk, they do not drop it. They use a system of blocks, pulleys, and friction devices like a porta wrap anchored at the base of the tree.
A porta wrap?
Yeah, it's a friction device. When the wood is cut, it dynamically loads onto the rigging line. The ground crew uses the friction device to absorb that massive shock load, slowly and safely lowering the wood to the ground. It completely protects the landscape, the underground utilities, and the workers below.
They are bleeding off the kinetic energy rather than letting the earth just absorb the impact.
Exactly.
It is an entirely different operational paradigm than a guy with a ladder and a flyer. Synthesizing all of these sources, I mean, the core thesis is inescapable. When you pay the premium for a certified insured arborist, you aren't just paying for aesthetic landscaping, you are buying a highly specialized risk mitigation strategy. You are shielding your legal standing, your home's foundation, and your property equity from catastrophic liability.
The cheap flyer is really just a localized illusion of savings that blinds the property owner to the macro-level risks. The premium you pay a professional is the cost of absolute certainty.
It fundamentally changes how you look at the environment around your home. We demand exhaustive background checks, licenses, and bonded insurance from the general contractors who wire our electrical panels or the plumbers who sweat our pipes. We would never let an uninsured amateur rip open our kitchen walls. Yet, because a tree is, natural, we are somehow lulled into forgetting that it operates under the exact same unforgiving laws of physics and liability as a built structure. It leaves you with a lingering thought. What other massive kinetic liabilities are currently lurking right outside your window, silently growing heavier every single day, completely unmonitored?
It's an uncomfortable question, but it's the exact question a homeowner must confront before deciding to dial the number on that discount flyer.
A completely different perspective on the canopy above our roofs. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.